Hello YouTube, welcome again to my channel Tyrannosaurus. It's me, Promethea. I'm answering another question today. It's actually a question that came through my Portuguese channel. For those of you that don't know or don't remember, I post these videos in 3 separate channels that I have in Spanish, English and Portuguese. So if you are more comfortable in Portuguese or Spanish, you can go over to the featured channels here on my channel and you will see links to those other 2 channels. And the question in particular was, are you Portuguese? Now I did answer it briefly right there in the comments, but I thought that I would give a more in-depth answer because it's kind of interesting to talk about my origin and my nationality. I guess they asked that because of my accent when I speak Portuguese. Apparently I sound Portuguese. Which is interesting because I've never been to Portugal, and that's part of your answer. No, I'm not Portuguese. Did discuss this a bit in the last video, but I'm Uruguayan and Swedish. I hold double nationality. I was actually born here in Sweden to Uruguayan parents. My parents, they were refugees for part of the English-speaking world, in particular the US. This may be news, but during the 60s, 70s and part of the 80s there were all over Latin America several dictatorships that were implanted there by the US government, particularly through the CIA. And this is not a conspiracy theory, it's something that the CIA has released documents about it. You can look up Operation Condor and you can see what the US government did. And I'm sorry to say this, but you're the baddies. These were terrible governments that were very harmful to the countries themselves and of course to the population and to anyone that happened to disgrace with that. In some cases it took over socialist elected governments because they saw that as a threat to their power. Even today you hear all over the American media talks about socialism as if it was equal to authoritarianism and if it was a bad word, when it's really not. And in the countries that got to implement it properly, it has been very beneficial. But well, my parents were politically involved and opposed to the military regime in Uruguay. They were activists in student and youth organizations, and because of that they got flagged. So when they found out that they were actively looking to capture my dad, they escaped to Argentina, which at the time was thought to be safe, and that's what many Uruguayan people did, and a lot of them still live in Argentina today. But then there was a coup d'etat in Argentina and my father was made a prisoner shortly after that, together with 2 of his brothers who were there too. And well, they were political prisoners with all the package that comes with that, thank you USA. And because of the work of an Amnesty International group here in Sweden, eventually they were granted refugee status to come to Sweden, and the military agreed to let them go, or sort of, because what they did was they told my mother and my aunt to come to Sweden with the kids because they needed to finish some paperwork and then they were going to send them. You know how that was going to turn out, so they didn't agree to that, and after a big struggle, eventually they managed to get them to release my dad and his brothers on the plane so that it would be guaranteed that they would not be staying there. And well, Sweden was a very welcoming country to a lot of people escaping from these situations, and it still is nowadays. So my parents stayed here for 8 years, and in the middle of that is when I was born. But I had no nationality at first, even though I was born here, because in order to be given Swedish nationality, your parents need to be Swedes, and mine weren't at the time. And of course I couldn't get my Uruguayan nationality, even though if one of your parents is Uruguayan, it doesn't matter where you're born, you get a citizenship, because if we had gone to a Uruguayan embassy, we would have been killed. So when I was 4 years old, my parents were granted the Swedish citizenship because of the time that they have been residing here. So that's when I got my Swedish citizenship, and then when democracy returned to Uruguay, I was able to get my Uruguayan citizenship. And well, now I find myself being sort of a refugee again, even though I'm technically not, because I have Swedish citizenship. But as I said in the other video, I had to run away from a situation, and Sweden is still very welcoming. And now there is an influx of refugees from other parts of the world, also because of the United States messing just to defend their interests, which have nothing to do with rights, with freedom or democracy. Of course, the situation is not the same for these refugees nowadays. Even though Sweden as a whole is a welcoming country, there are some other tensions going around. And I was talking about this with a friend the other day. She was also a refugee. She was telling me that a lot of people who came here claiming to be refugees were not. And these people really screwed everything for the rest, because they didn't behave properly. You know, little things like, apparently they used to have in the streets these boxes with newspapers and a little box next to it where you would pay, and it was honor-based. And some of these people would take the money, take the newspapers and go. So that doesn't exist anymore. And a lot of more serious stuff too. So there is some resistance from certain parts of the population to immigrants now because of that. And also because the Swedish government is not managing the situation in the best way that they really could. Their intentions are good, but apparently they are sending the refugees to only some parts of Sweden, and it's in particular some parts that are not the best prepared to receive them. They don't have the most jobs, they don't have the most housing. So, when you send someone to a place where they're not going to be able to get a job, where there are not enough resources to provide them proper education, proper health care, so it ends up affecting everybody in those places when it could be distributed among different communities and different cities that would be able to absorb them better. But it's only a part of the population that feels that way. Actually, the majority is still very welcoming. In fact, yesterday I started working with a group, a local LGBT organization that is organizing a festival for September prior to the Pride Parade. It's going to be called Welcome Out, as Welcome Out of the Closet, and it's aimed to the LGBT refugees that may be still closeted, to show them that Sweden feels quite different about LGBT people. In fact, we had a representative from the church in the meeting yesterday, and they want to do a rainbow mass during the festival, which is awesome. And the idea is, to show all of these newcomers that they can come out of the closet here and they can be free. So, that's where I'm from. I'm part Swedish and I'm part Uruguayan. I was raised mostly in Uruguay, but at the same time I was raised by parents that were kind of Swedish, because they came here in their 20s and they spent 8 years. That's a lot of time, and it shapes the way you think, the way you see the world a lot, and that in turn shaped me. So now I'm trying to find my way around here, but the way that things are here are not completely foreign to me. So if you ask me if I'm Swedish or I'm Uruguayan, it's really difficult. It's easy sometimes to just answer I'm Uruguayan, but it's not necessarily the culture that has affected me the most. Oftentimes I feel like a foreigner in Uruguay too. So, that's my answer then to the question. So remember that you can send me more questions for future videos via AskFM, via Tumblr, via Facebook, Twitter, or right here in the comments, and I will answer in the upcoming weeks. If you liked the video, please subscribe to my channel if you aren't already, and share the video around. See you next week. Bye bye.